Hello everyone, this is Juliana, and along with Camilo, we are going to talk about the second chapter of this book, The Coddling of the American Mind by Haidt and Lukianoff. Let's see. This is the name of the second chapter, The Untruth of Emotional Reasoning, Always Trust Your Feelings. So in here we have a important quotation which says, what really frightens and dismays us is not external events themselves, but the way in which we think about them. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance, by Epictetus. So this quotation is super important because it resumes like the whole content of the second chapter. Don't worry if you don't understand pretty well at the beginning, you are going to understand during the lesson. During the presentation. So here we have one situation, and it is important to make a comparison between this situation from here and this one from here. So let's start with that one. So imagine that you are in the therapist because you are feeling anxious ultimately. So you go there in order to get better. You start telling your therapist that you have some anxiety issues, and so you need help. Your therapist answers you. You should be in a great problem because anxiety is developed when you're in big problems, and so you're going to feel in that way for a long time. So the therapist here amplifies your fears instead of helping you to solve them. And then you realize that you have made a terrible mistake coming to see this therapist. And we have the other situation about Boethius. Boethius was a great scholar, and he went to the jail. So yeah, while he was in the jail, he wrote the Consolation of Philosophy. So in here, he wrote about an imaginary encounter with Lady Philosophy. And yeah, Lady Philosophy helped him to reframe his thinking and shoot off the negative emotions. So each exercise helps him see his situation in a new light, and also helps him to get prepared for the ultimate lesson of Lady Philosophy. And it's this one from here. Nothing is miserable unless you think it's so. And on the other hand, nothing brings happiness unless you are content with it. So they basically had a cognitive behavioral therapy. You're going to understand in a more clear way with the Camilo's explanation.
Now let's take a look at this part of the chapter. What is CBT? The developer of the CBT, Aaron Beck, noticed that his patients tended to get themselves caught in a feedback loop in which irrational negative beliefs caused powerful negative feelings, which in turn seemed to drive patients' reasoning, motivating them to find evidence to support their negative beliefs. Also, Beck noticed a pattern of beliefs called cognitive triads, such as I'm no good, my world is bleak, and my future is hopeless. Many people experience these feelings, but depressed people tend to hold all of them, enduring a psychological structure. These kinds of structures are called schemas. Beck discovered that if you can get people examine these beliefs and consider counter-evidence, it gives them at least some moments of relief from negative emotions. And if you release them from negative emotions, they become more open to questioning their negative beliefs. With repetition over a period of weeks or months, people can change their schemas and create different, more helpful habitual beliefs, such as I can handle most challenges or I have friends I can trust. It means that this method doesn't require spending years talking about one's childhood to solve depressed problems. The use of CBT has demonstrated to be effective, has been widely used, and is the best studied form of psychotherapy. Also, some findings about the use of the CBT is that it works like a drug for relieving the symptoms of anxiety disorders and mild to moderate depression without any negative side effects. Not only that, but CBT is effective for anorexia, bulimia, obsessive compulsive disorder, anger, marital discord, and stress-related disorders. Now here we have a list of the most common cognitive distortions that people can recognize to cultivate a good intellectual habit. I'll give you the definition and you will see some examples. Emotional reasoning, letting your feelings guide your interpretation of reality. Catastrophizing, focusing on the worst possible outcome and seeing it as most likely. Overgeneralizing, perceiving a global pattern of negatives on the basis of a single incident. Dichotomous thinking, viewing events or people in all or nothing terms. Mind reading, assuming that you know what people think without having sufficient evidence of their thoughts. Labeling, assigning global negative traits to yourself or others, often in the service of dichotomous thinking. Negative filtering, you focus almost exclusively on the negatives and seldom notice the positives. Discounting positives, claiming that the positive things you or others do are trivial, so that you can maintain a negative judgment. And the final one, blaming, focusing on the other person as the source of your negative feelings. You refuse to take responsibility for changing yourself.
Hello guys, this is Juliana again, and we're going to see the microaggression concept in this section of the chapter. So let's see. Here I have some key concepts and I am going to read out for you guys to understand in a clear way. So we have that microaggression is a brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults toward people of color. But not only toward people of color, but nowadays is applied much more broadly. And also we have to keep in mind the misperception of words and or situations. This is a key concept, super important. Or well, all the concepts are important here. So here I have an example that could help you to understand this topic. So we have a boss who is looking for a male employee instead of female employee. So this situation could be interpreted as a sort of micromachism or machism itself. However, the employer didn't mean to be sexist. He just wanted to employ a man because there are a lot of heavy functions in the job that implies to be very strong. And women have another type of skills. So these kind of situations could be interpreted as exclusion or marginalization. And sometimes is exactly what they are. But what the author claims here is that there are other ways to interpret those statements too. And we're going to see. So the author here proposed a different approach, a charitable approach. So if you are feeling attacked by someone or kind of, attacked, instead of respond to his or her words, instead you can say, I am guessing you didn't mean any harm when you said that. But you should know that some people might interpret that to mean. Yeah. So this approach would make it easier for people to respond when they feel hurt. So it would transform a victimization story into a story about one's own agency, and the interpersonal exchange would have a positive outcome. So here we have the implications in a college campus. So here, imagine that you are in charge of new students orientation in a Colombian university, which is very diverse. So there are students from a wide variety of racial groups, ethnic groups, religion, and socioeconomic backgrounds. So with all this diversity, there will be hundreds of misunderstandings on your campus each day. So the question for you guys is, how should you prepare these students to engage with one another in the most productive and beneficial way? So take the time to respond this question. And finally, to sum up, it is necessary to recognize some points. The first, you shouldn't foster feelings of anger and victimization in your students. Also, it's important to highlight the charitable approach and the generous interpretations could help a lot to decrease the oppression and marginalization feelings in society in general, even more in college campuses. So that's all for today. Thank you guys for listening.
Now let's see the final part of this chapter, this invitation and the ideological vetting of speakers. It is important to clarify that another way that emotional reasoning manifests itself on college campuses is through the disinvitation of guest speakers. But what is this invitation? It is related to banning a guest speaker who is making the students feel uncomfortable, upset, or angry due to the danger, in quotation marks, that this person poses to those students. These kinds of actions have been successful in about 46% of the attempts to disinvite a speaker. Also, the disinvitation's efforts were done by people from the right and from the left. However, after 2009, people from the left had a huge difference in these invitations, as you can see in the figure. Here we have also a question for you. What do you think was the reason for this increase? The idea that a university should protect its students from offensive ideas is the repudiation of Socrates' legacy, because he wanted to distort, to question and provoke his fellow Athenians to think through their current beliefs and change the ones they couldn't defend. Here we have also another question for you. What would you do to avoid cognitive distortions? All right. This is what Zachary Wood tried once by inviting Suzanne Venker at Williams College. She is a conservative critic of feminism and an advocate of traditional gender roles. Wood's co-organizer explained, "We choose Venker because millions of Americans think her viewpoints carry weight, or even agree with her. We think it is important to get an understanding of why so many Americans do think these really interesting and difficult thoughts, so we can challenge them and better understand our own behaviors and our own thoughts." The responses from Williams students were so ferocious that ultimately Wood decided they had to cancel the event. Later, one student wrote on a Facebook page, "When you bring a misogynistic, white supremacist men's rights activist to campus in the name of dialogue and the other side, you are not only causing actual mental, social, psychological, and physical harm to students, but you are also paying for the continued dispersal of violent ideologies that kill our black and brown, trans, femme sisters. Now you are dipping your hands in their blood," Zach Wood. This is a clear illustration of some of the cognitive distortions that were mentioned before: catastrophizing, labeling, overgeneralizing, and dichotomous thinking. To finish this part of the chapter, it should be considered Hannah Holborn Gray's principle. Education should not be intended to make people comfortable. It is meant to make them think. And that's all for today. Thank you very much.